There is a moment, quiet but unmistakable, when a person realizes that something within them has slipped out of alignment, as if the inner rhythm that once guided their decisions and desires has fallen out of tune. It is not dramatic or loud. It feels more like a subtle fatigue in the soul, a sense that the energy meant to move life forward has been leaking into thoughts of doubt, unfinished emotions, or silent forms of self-betrayal. Many arrive at this video carrying that sensation, wondering why their manifestations seem delayed, weakened, or reshaped into something smaller than what their heart once envisioned. And although the world insists that the solution is to try harder, a deeper intelligence within you already knows that manifestation has nothing to do with effort and everything to do with coherence. As Dr. Joe Dispenza teaches, a person cannot reach a new reality while carrying the emotional signatures of the old one. The body will simply recreate the familiar because it has memorized survival more intimately than possibility. Understanding this is not about blame. It is about remembering that energy follows attention, and when attention fractures through stress, unresolved memories, or internal conflict, your field weakens. Your intention still exists, but it broadcasts through static. This introduction opens the doorway to recognizing those subtle leaks, the emotional patterns that drain your creative force, the beliefs that distort your purpose, and the unconscious habits that divert your energy away from the reality you wish to manifest. Today, we begin the process of reclaiming that power. There are times when a person feels a quiet tension between what they desire and what they consistently experience, as though their inner world speaks two different languages at once. One voice articulates dreams, intentions, and visions of a more abundant future, yet another voice, quieter but more influential, holds emotional patterns learned long before the desire existed. This subtle mismatch forms the first crack in the manifestation process, not because the dream is unrealistic, but because the emotional body is still trained to anticipate an older reality. When this happens, the electromagnetic field generated by both heart and mind loses coherence, sending signals to the world that contradict the clarity of conscious intention. It is not a failure of manifestation, but a fragmentation of personal energy that deserves a deeper understanding. A person rarely notices when this misalignment begins. It often emerges during ordinary moments. A quiet morning when anxiety arises without cause, a decision delayed because something doesn't feel ready, or a desire that seems powerful one day and strangely distant the next. These fluctuations are not signs of weakness. They are echoes of the body attempting to maintain what it knows, even when the mind longs for something new. Emotional memory becomes a stronger magnet than thought alone, shaping the energy field long before intention reaches its full strength. This is why the inner experience can feel split. The heart wants expansion, while the nervous system quietly protects familiar patterns, even if those patterns no longer serve. Understanding this divide requires acknowledging that the emotional body is not the enemy. It is a storyteller. It holds the history of disappointments, unresolved grief, hidden fears, and inherited beliefs that have become part of its operating system. When the emotional body encounters a new desire that challenges its familiar narrative, it does not resist out of malice but out of conditioning. The field becomes unstable not because the dream is too large, but because the emotional signature associated with it has not yet been updated. This creates a subtle energetic interference, the static that weakens manifestation and diffuses purpose. For many, the first sign of this disconnection appears as internal fatigue, not the physical kind, but an existential heaviness, the sensation of carrying oneself through life rather than moving with life. That heaviness is the byproduct of living in contradiction, the mind projecting a future while the body remains anchored in a past it has not yet released. The result is an electromagnetic signal that becomes inconsistent, flickering between possibility and memory. Manifestation becomes diluted because the universe responds not only to what a person wants, but to what they consistently embody. When coherence collapses, people often assume their intentions are not strong enough. They try to amplify thought, visualizations, affirmations, or goals. Yet the issue is rarely cognitive. The challenge lies deeper, within the emotional undercurrent shaping every signal sent into the field. Without emotional congruence, even the most powerful intentions lose momentum. The body continues to emit the frequency of an older self, one shaped by worries, disappointments, and survival instincts. This gap between who someone wants to become and who their body still believes they are becomes the silent architect of stagnation. Bridging this gap begins with awareness rather than correction. The emotional body must be heard, not forced into submission. When a person recognizes their inner contradictions without judgment, the field begins to soften. The tension lessens because the emotional body finally receives acknowledgement. That acknowledgement opens the pathway for deeper coherence, a subtle realignment between thought, emotion, and energetic expression. Coherence is not created through pressure, it emerges from internal harmony. A helpful way to imagine this dynamic is to picture the self as a musical instrument. The intention is the melody one wishes to play, while the emotional state determines the tuning of the instrument. No matter how skillfully a melody is imagined, if the strings are misaligned, the music will not match the intention. The sound will waver, distort, or lose resonance. Likewise, when emotions remain unresolved or misattuned, the manifestation process follows the emotional frequency rather than the mental desire. The field cannot express harmony if the instrument has not been tuned. This does not mean that emotional alignment must be perfect before one can manifest. Rather, it suggests that coherence amplifies intention while fragmentation disperses it. Each moment of emotional clarity creates a stronger signal, allowing intention to anchor itself more deeply into the field. It is a gradual process, similar to tuning an instrument through repeated, gentle adjustments. The person learns to recognize when their internal state drifts off key and brings themselves back into resonance through presence, reflection, and emotional honesty. The journey toward alignment also involves acknowledging the role of the nervous system. When the body remains in a state of subtle vigilance, it interprets new desires as threats because they require unfamiliar emotional territory. This biological response does not disappear through force, it dissolves through safety. When the mind and heart consistently signal that new experiences are welcome, the nervous system relaxes, allowing the emotional body to recalibrate. Coherence follows naturally, and the electromagnetic field shifts toward stability. Once the emotional field begins to harmonize with intention, something profound occurs. The future no longer feels distant. It becomes felt rather than imagined. This sensation marks the moment when manifestation stops being a mental exercise and becomes an energetic truth. The body recognizes the future as familiar, and the electromagnetic signal strengthens accordingly. Manifestation accelerates not through effort, but through resonance. Thus, the first chapter of this journey invites a deeper awareness of the internal divide that may be draining your energy. It is not a flaw, but a call to reunite the many parts of yourself that have been speaking different languages. As coherence grows, intention gains clarity, and the field becomes a unified expression of your purpose. In this harmony, manifestation becomes a natural extension of your inner truth. There is a quiet moment in every internal journey when the mind feels overwhelmed by its own attempts to orchestrate control, as though thought alone could bend reality into a new shape. This moment often emerges during transitions, when a person tries to reach beyond their familiar life and move toward a version of themselves that has not yet been embodied. At first, the desire feels expansive and alive, but as time passes, the emotional weight of old memories, expectations, and survival instincts begins to surface. The brain, sensing the unfamiliar territory ahead, shifts into a subtle mode of protection. This shift interrupts coherence, creating a fracture between intention and experience. What follows is not failure, but the collapse of a delicate internal alignment that must be understood before it can be transformed. Neural coherence is the harmonious communication between different regions of the brain. Thought, emotion, intuition, and meaning working in synchronized rhythm. When this system is balanced, the mind becomes a clear channel, allowing intention to move outward into the world without distortion. But when coherence breaks, the mind becomes noisy. Thoughts scatter, emotions intensify, and the individual feels as though they are mentally running in place. This internal noise weakens the energy field, dispersing creative power into fragmented impulses rather than focused manifestation. Many describe this as a sensation of mental exhaustion, a heaviness that surrounds even simple decisions, or a quiet fear that seems irrational yet persistent. The root of this fragmentation is not a lack of discipline or determination. It arises from the brain's attempt to reconcile two realities at once: the familiar past and the imagined future. The familiar past is encoded through emotional memory, moments of disappointment, survival, pressure, or loss. These memories shape neural pathways that signal the body to maintain caution even when change is desired. When a new intention is introduced, the brain analyzes it through the lens of past emotional signatures. If the new vision contradicts the emotional history, the mind generates internal noise, not because the desire is wrong, but because the body feels unprepared to support it. This noise often appears in the form of overthinking. A person begins to analyze every detail, attempting to predict outcomes, avoid mistakes, or control the unfolding of events. Neural networks become overstimulated, and dopamine rises sharply, creating a false sense of urgency. Instead of fueling clarity, dopamine amplifies compulsive thinking, turning desire into obsession. The brain misinterprets this heightened mental activity as a signal that something is at risk, triggering protective responses that disrupt coherence. The more the person tries to force mental control, the louder the internal noise becomes. This cycle gradually drains the energetic field. The electromagnetic resonance of the heart weakens as emotional pressure increases, while the mind struggles to maintain clarity. The body enters a state of subtle vigilance, anticipating challenges even when none exist. Manifestation becomes distorted, not because intention lacks power, but because the internal environment lacks harmony. The field broadcasts contradictory signals, one part of the self reaching toward expansion, while another quietly clings to protection. The universe responds not to the force of intention, but to the stability of internal coherence. Understanding this process brings compassion to the experience of stagnation. It reveals that the struggle is not a reflection of inadequacy, but of an internal system attempting to protect itself from the unknown. The collapse of neural coherence is a sign that the individual is moving beyond the boundaries of their familiar identity. It is the threshold of transformation, the place where the old self must release its hold so the new self can emerge. But release does not occur through pressure. It happens through presence, recognizing the internal noise without becoming defined by it. When the mind is overwhelmed, the emotional body often responds with avoidance. A person may feel drawn to distractions, delayed decisions, or a sense of numbness. These reactions are forms of self-preservation, the body's way of slowing the process so it can adapt at a tolerable pace. This adaptation requires emotional honesty. Instead of pushing through the noise, the individual benefits from understanding its source: an unanswered memory, an unprocessed disappointment, a fear of becoming someone unfamiliar. When these emotional threads are acknowledged, the noise begins to soften. The mind regains clarity, and neural coherence gradually returns. The relationship between thought and emotion becomes central here. When the emotional state contradicts the intention, the brain divides its energy between two competing narratives. But when the emotional body begins to align with the inner vision, when the person genuinely feels the possibility of the future, the brain reorganizes itself accordingly. Neural pathways rewire, the electromagnetic field stabilizes, and the internal noise diminishes. Coherence is not a sudden shift, but a gentle recalibration over time, the mind learning to trust a new identity that has not yet been fully lived. A symbol that reflects this process is the image of a river meeting a wall of stones. The river represents the flow of intention, steady and determined, while the stones represent emotional memories accumulated over years. When coherence collapses, it is as if the river crashes against these stones, creating turbulence and froth. But when the stones are gradually softened or rearranged through awareness, the water begins to flow smoothly again. The river does not disappear during turbulence. Its flow simply becomes interrupted until harmony is restored. As this alignment deepens, something extraordinary begins to happen. The mind becomes quieter, not through force but through understanding. The emotional body relaxes into the vision of the future, and the nervous system releases its grip on old patterns. Thought and feeling move together in unified direction. The electromagnetic field strengthens, broadcasting a steady and consistent signal. Manifestation becomes less about effort and more about resonance, a natural extension of inner coherence. Thus, The collapse of neural coherence is not a failure but an invitation. It signals that a deeper alignment is possible and that the self is ready to move beyond familiar narratives. In the restoration of coherence, intention gains clarity, emotion gains depth, and the field becomes a true reflection of the future the individual is meant to experience. There comes a moment in every person's inner journey when they sense that something unseen has been shaping the direction of their life, as though an invisible hand has been guiding choices long before they were consciously made. This sensation often arises not from external events, but from the quiet awareness that patterns keep repeating themselves despite sincere efforts to create change. The desire for transformation is genuine, yet the results seem to echo the past. This is the territory of unconscious beliefs, the emotional and symbolic programming formed through years of experiences, memories, and inherited narratives. These beliefs do not speak in words. They communicate through sensation, expectation, and instinct. And it is their resonance, silent but powerful, that often redirects the energy of manifestation without the individual ever realizing it. Unconscious beliefs act like anchors tied to emotional memories. They hold the weight of past disappointments, unresolved grief, or subtle messages absorbed during childhood. Even when the mind passionately commits to a new vision of the future, the emotional body may still be loyal to these old narratives. This loyalty is not a form of sabotage but a protective instinct. The unconscious believes that what is familiar is safe and what is unfamiliar must be approached with caution. When new intentions arise, they challenge the emotional history stored within the body. If that history has not been acknowledged, the unconscious sends signals of hesitation, redirecting energy toward what feels known. Manifestation becomes filtered through the old belief structures, reshaping the desired future into something more aligned with past expectations rather than present intentions. This is why people often sense a contradiction between what they want and what they consistently attract. It is not a lack of clarity, intelligence, or worthiness. It is the emotional imprint left by experiences that were too overwhelming, too repeated, or too defining to simply disappear. These imprints form patterns that guide behavior, perception, and energetic expression. When left unexplored, they create a subtle gravitational pull that draws life back to what is emotionally familiar. A person may aspire to abundance, yet feel internally pulled towards scarcity. They may desire love, yet anticipate abandonment. They may envision expansion, yet subconsciously brace for disappointment. These internal splits shape the emotional signature broadcasted into the field, influencing the manifestation process long before thought comes into play. The challenge here is not to eliminate these beliefs, but to understand how they operate. They behave like hidden lenses, coloring how the world is perceived. A lens shaped by fear will blur opportunities and magnify risks. A lens shaped by old grief will soften hope and sharpen caution. A lens shaped by generational narratives may whisper limits that no longer apply. These lenses alter the electromagnetic field, imprinting it with emotional frequencies that contradict conscious intentions. The universe responds not only to what a person desires, but to what they consistently radiate. When these radiations contain echoes of old beliefs, the field sends back experiences that resonate with those echoes. This dynamic often comes to the surface during transitions. When someone takes steps toward a new path, the unconscious reacts by surfacing old emotions, as if asking, "Are we prepared for this?" The discomfort that arises is not a sign of misalignment, but evidence of profound change. The emotional body must release its grip on old identities before the new identity can fully root itself. This release is rarely linear. It happens in waves, moments of clarity followed by moments of contraction. Each wave reveals another layer of belief waiting to be acknowledged. And with each acknowledgement, the resonance shifts slightly, making space for a more aligned frequency. A powerful symbol for this process is the image of a mirror fogged by breath. The fog represents unconscious beliefs obscuring the clarity of intention. The desire is present, the vision is intact, yet the reflection appears distorted. As awareness deepens, the fog begins to fade, and the reflection becomes clearer. The person begins to see themselves as they truly are, not as their past taught them to be. This clarity strengthens the electromagnetic field, aligning it with authentic resonance rather than inherited patterns. Another aspect of this hidden resonance lies in the body's response to emotional memory. When certain beliefs have been reinforced over time, the nervous system becomes conditioned to anticipate specific outcomes. This anticipation creates an energetic expectation that shapes the manifestation field. Even without conscious awareness, the body may brace for disappointment, preparing itself for an outcome that no longer reflects the individual's true desires. This bracing subtly redirects energy, creating manifestations that correspond more to emotional memory than to conscious intention. Understanding this allows for compassion toward the self. It reveals that the struggle is not due to weakness, but due to the body's attempt to preserve emotional continuity. Transformation emerges when these unconscious beliefs are illuminated. This illumination does not require confrontation. It requires recognition. When a person notices a pattern within themselves that does not align with their vision, they begin to soften the grip of the belief. Emotional narratives lose their power when they are no longer hidden. The field begins to reorganize itself in response to newfound clarity. The energy that was once tied to outdated stories becomes available for creation, expansion, and alignment. Manifestation accelerates as the emotional signature becomes more coherent with intention. As the unconscious becomes conscious, the individual gains access to a deeper form of freedom, the freedom to choose their resonance rather than inherit it. This shift marks a turning point in the manifestation journey. The energy that once replayed old patterns begins to move in harmony with the desired future. The inner landscape becomes fertile, receptive, and aligned. What once felt distant now feels attainable, not because circumstances have changed, but because the energetic field has shifted into resonance with a new truth. In this chapter, the illumination of hidden beliefs becomes the doorway to transformation. The resonance that once redirected manifestation begins to dissolve, and the emotional body learns to support the vision of the future rather than protect the memory of the past. This alignment forms the foundation for a life guided not by old narratives, but by a purpose that is alive, conscious, and deeply authentic. There is a particular kind of inner conflict that reveals itself not through dramatic breakdowns, but through small hesitations, subtle delays, or patterns that repeat just when progress seems possible. This conflict often feels like a quiet force pulling a person backward, away from the direction they consciously want to move. It is not laziness, nor a lack of clarity, and certainly not a flaw in character. Rather, it is the vibrational interference created by self-sabotage, an internal mechanism that emerges when the emotional body is not yet prepared to embody the future the mind envisions. This interference forms a silent space between intention and action, between purpose and frequency, and within that space the energy of manifestation dissipates before it can materialize into form. Self-sabotage is rarely obvious. It hides within familiar routines, comfortable excuses, or a sense of emotional heaviness that appears just as momentum builds. It is born from the body's loyalty to what it knows, even when what it knows no longer reflects the person's deeper truth. The emotional memory stored within the nervous system often feels safer than the unknown potential of a new life. When a desire pushes against that emotional memory, the body responds with resistance, not out of opposition to growth, but out of its instinct to preserve continuity. This resistance becomes a vibrational static, a distortion that interrupts the signal of purpose being sent into the field. For many, self-sabotage takes shape in the form of procrastination or withdrawal, as though the body retreats just when action is needed. Yet beneath this retreat lies a profound emotional story, the story of a self that once attempted change and was met with fear, loss, or disappointment. The emotional residue of these experiences settles into the subconscious, creating a belief that expansion might lead to vulnerability. When new opportunities arise, the emotional body recalls these imprints and contracts, redirecting energy away from purpose and toward perceived safety. The individual may not consciously notice this contraction, but the vibrational field reflects it immediately. This creates an energetic conflict where the mind speaks of transformation while the emotional body whispers caution. The field becomes divided, emitting two signals simultaneously, one of desire and one of hesitation. Because manifestation responds to coherence rather than intensity, the hesitation often outweighs the desire. The universe mirrors the dominant emotion, not the loudest thought. As long as the emotional body remains anchored in protective patterns, the future cannot fully unfold. Each step forward becomes entangled with invisible threads of doubt, fear, or exhaustion that pull the person back into familiar territory. A deeper layer of self-sabotage emerges when a person misinterprets purpose as an external destination rather than an internal state. Many believe they must find clarity before taking steps toward transformation, when in truth, clarity often arises through the process of alignment itself. Purpose does not descend from the outside. It grows from the coherence between inner truth and emotional resonance. When purpose is misunderstood as something distant or hidden, the individual may unknowingly create a psychological distance between themselves and the life they wish to manifest. This distance becomes a subtle vibrational message that reinforces the belief that the future is out of reach. The interference created by this belief can be felt in the body as a quiet discouragement, a sense that progress requires more effort than one has available. Yet this heaviness is not a sign of insufficiency. It is the emotional body signaling that it lacks the energetic support necessary to sustain the envisioned expansion. Emotional resilience must match the magnitude of the dream. When it does not, self-sabotage appears as a mechanism to protect the self from stepping into a version of reality it is not yet prepared to hold. This protective mechanism becomes the very energy that delays manifestation. Imagining purpose as a gravitational field provides a symbolic understanding of this dynamic. Purpose exerts an inward pull, drawing the individual toward alignment. Yet if the emotional mass of unresolved fears or old narratives is greater than the gravitational pull of purpose, the person remains in orbit around their potential rather than descending into it. The field becomes stretched, inconsistent, divided between force and counterforce. In this state, action feels fragmented, intuition becomes quiet, and the energetic pathway forward loses clarity. The interference is not a punishment, but a message, revealing the inner weight that must be acknowledged before alignment can occur. Understanding this interference requires compassion for the self. Self-sabotage is not a sign of failure, but an indicator of an unspoken emotional need. It is the body asking for reconciliation, for integration, for the safety to move into expansion without being overwhelmed by the shadows of the past. When the emotional body feels seen, the gravitational pull of purpose strengthens. The inner field begins to shift. Energy becomes more concentrated, intentions become more stable, and the vibrational static dissolves. The space between who the person is and who they are becoming grows smaller, eventually merging into a unified frequency. The dissolution of self-sabotage is rarely abrupt. It unfolds through subtle recognitions, noticing a hesitation without judgment, acknowledging a recurring pattern without resistance, or recognizing an emotional contraction without retreating from it. Each recognition softens the interference, allowing purpose to take on a clearer, more resonant shape. The frequency of the individual becomes more congruent with their desires, and the manifestation process regains its natural flow. In this chapter, the vibrational interference caused by self-sabotage reveals itself as a misunderstood guardian, one that protects until it learns that expansion no longer threatens survival. Once the emotional body feels secure, the purpose that once felt distant becomes accessible. The field stabilizes, the internal dialogue shifts, and manifestation becomes not an act of force, but a natural expression of a coherent and aligned self. There comes a moment in every journey of transformation when the individual recognizes that manifestation was never simply about attracting an outcome, but about becoming the kind of being who can sustain the reality they long for. Throughout this exploration, a deeper truth has emerged. Your energy is not lost, broken, or weak. It is dispersed, divided, or entangled in emotional signatures that no longer reflect who you are becoming. The work of realignment is not about forcing the universe to respond, but about gathering the scattered pieces of yourself and allowing them to return to coherence. This is the quiet power at the heart of manifestation. As Joe Dispenza teaches, the field around you becomes an extension of the field within you. When the internal space shifts into harmony, the external reality reorganizes itself in response. In many ways, the journey described here is not about learning something new, but remembering something ancient. Neville Goddard often wrote that every state of consciousness holds its own destiny. To inhabit a state is to inherit the life that naturally unfolds from it. When the emotional body remains anchored in past states, fear, scarcity, disappointment, the future becomes filtered through those memories. But when the emotional landscape begins to shift, even subtly, the gravitational pull of a new state begins to emerge. This shift is not theatrical. It is quiet, almost imperceptible at first, as though the soul is whispering that the time has come to step into the life that has been waiting. The restoration of energy, purpose, and manifestation begins with the recognition that you are not at war with yourself. The hesitation you felt, the fragmentation, the emotional contractions, each one was a signal pointing toward an inner space that needed acknowledgement, not correction. When these signals are honored, the emotional body relaxes. The nervous system releases its grip on old narratives, the internal dialogue softens, and the field begins to steady itself. Coherence emerges not through pressure, but through an inner alignment that feels like coming home. In this state of alignment, manifestation becomes an extension of presence rather than effort. You no longer project desire outward with intensity. Instead, you embody the frequency of what you seek. The future becomes familiar because its emotional signature already lives within you. Purpose, once distant, becomes a natural expression of your energy. You stop trying to reach the future and begin living from it. And so this conclusion returns you to a simple truth. Your energy is not wasted. It is waiting to be gathered, directed, aligned, waiting for the moment when your heart, mind, and emotional body move as a single field. In that unity, manifestation ceases to be a mystery and becomes your natural way of existing in the world. Before you leave this moment of reflection, consider something deeply. What part of you is finally ready to stop repeating the past and begin embodying the future you have always sensed was meant for you? This question is not meant to provoke urgency, but to awaken recognition. Somewhere within you there is a version of yourself who already knows the answer. Quietly, confidently, patiently waiting for you to step into alignment with it. And perhaps this video has opened a doorway, offering the first glimpse of what becomes possible when your energy no longer leaks into old emotional stories. If this journey resonated with you, if even one sentence felt like it described something you have silently carried for years, then this is the moment to continue walking with us. This channel exists for people just like you, individuals who are ready not just to dream of a new life, but to grow into it with emotional depth, spiritual awareness, and coherence of purpose. By subscribing, you become part of a community committed to inner transformation, grounded manifestation, and the rediscovery of personal power. And before you move on, continue your journey by watching the next video waiting on your screen. Each piece builds upon the last, guiding you step by step into a deeper understanding of your energy, your purpose, and the life that is already unfolding for you. Your transformation does not end here. This is only the beginning.